All right. Here we go. I shall turn off the music. We are waiting for our special guest who happens to be like right out there, who's going, there he goes, right by the window to jump onto his computer. Welcome to True Payroll's update of the CARES Act. We're going to get into some details of the things that we're seeing and what's happening with the payroll protection program loans. Not a whole lot's changed, I don't think, with the EIDL. And as soon as Jim jumps on here, we'll get going. In the meantime, there's a few of you that have joined in. There's a Q&A if you have some questions, or you can raise your hand, or you can use the chat function to let us know that you have a question, and we will do everything we can to get to everybody's questions and get some answers as best as we can. So as we wait for Jim, and there he is. All right, why don't we just jump right in? Jim, can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Wait, let me get the string. We can run that down the hall in the office. So Jim has kept really on top of the legislative changes and updates that have come through, and the both of us really have kind of our finger on the pulse from a customer perspective. So Jim, why don't you share with us a little bit about, or a lot of bit about, some of the things that are changed and have updated even as of last night.
So basically, I guess we'll start with the paycheck protection. The SBA EIDL loan is still pretty much, everything with that has stayed the same for the initial $10,000 disaster grant. Anything you're applying for beyond that is just complying with the SBA loan application rules that is specifically done through them. As for anybody asking, I know of no one that has gotten the EIDL loan approved or paid yet. We are both for some of my own clients, some of Al's clients, and some of our mutual clients, we have seen an uptick in those that are being approved for the PPP Paycheck Protection Plan loans. And they seem to be coming pretty quick now. There was an update from the Treasury Department last night. They worked out some of the kinks, so they've sort of, to use the COVID-19 thing, have sort of flattened the curve on issues with getting that done in the paperwork.
That was very subtle, very subtle.
I thought you'd like that. You know, this is normally supposed to be a day of celebration for me because it's the 15th and it would be tax time. And I would be taking tomorrow and several more days off.
We'd be having a beer shortly.
The man I'm doing this webinar with conned me into buying a tax practice years ago, and nothing has gone right since. We've been hit by hurricanes. Broke both my arms 1 year, and now we're dealing with a global pandemic. So everything that can extend a tax season for me has extended a tax season for me. But,
some would say I sold at the right time, Jim.
Yeah, that it was definitely, I broke the cardinal rule. I bought high and you should have sold low, and it didn't work out. But so for the paycheck protection, a lot of people have been asking, gotten a lot of questions and emails and things from tax clients. One, there's a lot of people out there that are giving a lot of other people out there a lot of advice without knowing exactly what they're talking about. In particular, I have one client who operates as an S corp, but didn't have any payroll for the business in 2019, and has people telling her that she can apply for a payroll protection plan loan, which she cannot, according to the latest regulations. The newest ones came out yesterday. Small, subtle little things, nothing major. But if you do not have payroll for a period either in 19 or prior to some point prior in the period that you're using, you are not eligible to get a paycheck protection plan loan because your number is zero, regardless of what you divide by.
And let's clarify two other categories. So we don't necessarily call it payroll when it's somebody self-employed filing a Schedule C, or we wouldn't necessarily call it payroll if you're a member in an LLC getting a guaranteed payment for service, both of which those two do qualify because you're paying the self-employment tax. So if you haven't paid a self-employment tax on remuneration, whether it's through a paycheck, your Schedule C, or as a guaranteed payment for service in an LLC, you're not eligible.
Yeah, and there's no, I've seen some of the back and forth between my own clients and their outside experts. And usually when I get a thing that starts off, it's not that I don't believe you. Listen, we spend a ton of time reading the regulations. I have spent a ton of time taking continuing ed classes on specific things that are just dealing with this. And we have stayed on top of it, I think, as much as we can, even to the point that, we recognize, if you look back at our first webinar at what we advise to do and what the rules are now, they look like night and day. But we have, we've updated as we have gotten the information, and with every government law and every government regulation that ever comes out, what the law says and what the regulations allow end up being two different things. And as with anything, as they've gone to do stuff, they have seen the potential for abuses and modified the rules as they go. And at the end of the day, they're the government, so they can do that as many times and as often as they want. But the latest is so, if you are, if you're a Schedule C taxpayer, say, so if you have negative income, you didn't pay self-employment tax. My understanding, reading of the legislation and the rules, you are not going to be eligible. If you are a partner in a partnership and your payments on your K-1 are payments for use of capital and not payments for services, or actually providing services to the partnership, you are not eligible. If you have if you are an S corp and S corp K-1 receiver, but you have no W-2 income if you're the owner of that company, or if you have employees, or you did all your work through contractors, you are not eligible to apply for it. I won't even say you're not eligible to apply for it. You can go ahead and apply for it, but when you get to that 2.5 times your monthly payroll and the number is zero, we'll go back to 4th grade math, and 0 times anything is going to be 0. So it's kind of where that one is at. So if you're looking for something and you don't have the payroll, my suggestion is then you look at the EIDL loan, and potentially then going further in the process and actually borrowing money up to $2 million from the Small Business Administration. The other thing to keep in mind for those that are getting the Paycheck Protection Plan loan, think about when you're applying. It's not so much an issue now as we move closer to the 8 weeks that's going to take us to June 30th, but your payroll period starts on utilizing that 75%, at least 75% of the amount that you get has to go to payroll. You have to start immediately as soon as you get that lien. So if you were somebody, let's say, that got it in early or mid-March, you can't push it off until May or June. The payroll amount that they're going to calculate based on your forgiveness is going to be in the 8-week period right after you receive that money. And then additionally, and just a full disclosure, I'm going to go back and review tonight, but my understanding is from a class that I took on this yesterday, if you have a reduction in employees, even though your payroll, you could have your payroll amount stay the same. If you have a reduction in employees, there is going to be a calculation that's made. So number's sake, simple sake, you have 10 employees when you started this and you drop down to 8, of that loan at the minimal, the 71% for payroll is not going to be forgivable. So you have to have the same number of employees throughout the duration of using the Paycheck Protection Plan as you did prior to it. Doesn't have to be the same employees, but
and right, doesn't have to be the same, but you also have to have an approximate same amount of payroll as well.
correct. Yeah, you need, so it's got to be roughly equal to what you had or greater. If you private message Al and I afterwards, we're more than willing to put ourselves out there to be employees for people should you need it. So we're gonna be bought. That's all I'm saying.
Everybody needs another bookkeeper. That's
I'm kind of bored right now. I've only got about 400 extensions, so I'm looking for a second part-time gig.
A little side hustle.
Yeah.
So one of the changes I think that has happened.
Oh, Al, I do have to answer this question just real quick. Yes, Mike Burkhart, that is the leg lamp in my office.
It's fragile.
It's fragile. It was a major award. So just saying, it was a major award.
Was a major award. So one of the things I think that has changed is the time frame from which you actually have to utilize the money. I think originally it was June 30th, but now it's an 8-week period from when you actually get the proceeds of a loan, correct?
Correct. Yeah. My understanding on some of the original things is when it came out, you had up until June 30th to go it. Now the regulation appears to say that it's your 8-week period from the time you receive the money, and you can't pick. So if you're somebody that is concerned about cash flow more toward, if you're a seasonal business or touristy type thing like we are down here, I'll preface by saying, one, follow up with your bank to find out how long the process is from start to approval. What we've seen with one of our clients today, I think that was probably 10 days, give or take for them. The other issue you have to take into consideration of that too is there's $349 billion that was put out there. Treasury Department has asked for another $251 billion, I believe, but that request is stalled in political hustling between the two parties as to additional monies and other things. So there's no guarantee my personal belief is that the $251 billion will come. Especially if it doesn't look like things are going to be lifted and we're going to be opening up slower, not faster, and later than sooner. But again, it's a finite pool of money, so delaying to get to play your cash flow game to utilize it in a later 8-week period. And as I said, right now it's the middle of April, so assuming no changes or to the duration or time frame, we're about 10 weeks out, give or take. So it's not so much a concern now as those that were applying for loans and that type of stuff back in early March, and that when they may have not necessarily needed the money. And again, the rules changed when it first came out. It worked like the EIDL loan, where you could potentially get forgiveness for it if you used it for rents, payrolls, a few specific things. But with the EIDL loan, there is no percentages. With the Paycheck Protection Plan, this is all designed to keep people on payroll and keep people working. And the other thing, employers are just going to be aware of. I don't know. We had a discussion with another client today. What do you do if you get approved for the loan? You have employees that are on unemployment, and they're not going to make as much as you. Now, the employer has no liability, and Al can speak better to this because it's more of a payroll thing, but I believe the employer has no liability to let unemployment know that the employer offered the job back. But I don't know how they will view that. My guess would be is if you brought the person back and you paid them, unemployment's going to go back to the employee and say, guess what, you owe us this money. We've said this has sort of been a common theme. I believe there's going to be a lot of governmental audits and clawbacks and looking at things as it relates to unemployment. And
Well, they're going to be able to do that fairly quickly too, from the perspective of filed quarterly returns. So putting people back on payroll and they don't go off of unemployment's going to see that.
yeah, and my guess
Really
is
quick.
that is probably not going to just be, hey, you need to repay this. I would imagine there will be some sanctions in terms of penalties and all of those type of things. I don't think they will be kind and just say that's not one they're going to overlook and say, all right, well, it was the virus. I mean, I guess you could try and say the 103 fever, I didn't know I was being paid by both. I wouldn't recommend that. At the same time, I'm not a criminal defense lawyer and I don't even play one on TV. So,
So we do have a question. Let's interject on that one. Are there any banks giving loans for the PPP program that are not current customers? I am not aware. We know of one bank, First Florida Integrity.
Integrity, yeah. They seem to be dealing with people on the outside. On that, I would say look at some of the, however few there are, look at some of the smaller banks. The bigger ones are no. Bank of America, if you don't have an existing relationship.
Chase, Wells.
One of the really difficult ones, don't even bother to waste your time, is Wells Fargo, because not only is Wells Fargo trying to comply with this program, Wells Fargo is also trying to comply with restrictions that have been put on them because of the opening and churning of accounts scandal that went on in 2016, 17, and 18, where they were basing fees and that on open and closing accounts. So they had restrictions. So Wells Fargo is going to be one of the toughest to do, but I know Bank of America you have to have a relationship of some sort. Chase, you have to have a relationship of some sort.
And we know that, yeah, First Florida, and go ahead.
I don't know about Centennial, if they're requiring, I believe Iberia is requiring a relationship. And
you can move your funds over either. That's not going to get you.
Yeah, so it's not something
line, so to speak.
Most of them aren't going, oh, hey, if I bring my stuff over here, will you let me apply? Gabrielle, I would say first and foremost, wherever you're banking, start with them. And again, you're going to fill out some uniform forms from the federal government, but every bank is allowed to have its own additional criteria. So that's why we are not specifically, explaining how to go about doing this, because every bank is different. The other question that I have had from clients is, will you help me fill these forms out? Will you help me do all this stuff? The Act specifically states that licensed individual, you can't be compensated for filling out these forms and preparing these forms for anybody. There's a whole lot of leeway for consultation fees and consulting fees and all of that. My own personal approach I've taken to it is, passing along general information and the guidelines as they're published, mainly because of the liability that could potentially come with it. One biggest reason is I'm not doing it is because, one, I just don't have the time right now with it being tax season, but secondly, the fact that for licensed professionals, there could theoretically be exposure if you in any way, shape, or form would imply that you've either audited these forms or done some kind of compilation work or something. Our overall approach to this, I think I can speak for Al here too, is we've normally stayed away from that kind of compilation stuff, just because of the liability, of it. But obviously, any general guidelines and things in the documentation, and where to go and how to let out in general, questions on stuff related to your specific thing. If you're a client of ours, we're more than happy to, tell you where you find information that you need. But the Act does specifically prohibit compensation for, filling out any of these forms and that. So.
All right. So I think Gabriella may have meant Sun Trust, or
Mike
maybe
Burkhardt's got a lot of non-aid questions going on
he's
here.
very observant, though. Thanks for
Don't
paying
be jealous,
attention to our
Mike. You know,
surroundings, Mike. We
when you
know
got
who we can put with us to watch our back.
when you got some Costco connections, you know, you get the goods. It's all part of being awesome, my man.
So this is I'm going to segue this just a little bit, because one of the things that we said in the very beginning is very reminiscent of the BP claims era, and one of the things that you and I experienced then was the lack of really solid accounting and bookkeeping records, and we're not seeing that per se, but we are seeing the lack of payroll. So in both of those situations, there's a point at which you got to look at your business. And Jim, I'd love for you to comment on this, that you got to look at your business and determine what you're actually going to do in the long term. And this whole CARES package certainly goes to speak to that, where as an owner, are you paying yourself payroll? And are you actually preparing your business for ultimate sale, or what are you going to do with your business into the future? And I think that this just bring to light a situation for most business owners, that we're so busy actually in our business and working it and growing it, that at the point where we're like, oh crap, I'm ready to get out of this thing, we may not have necessarily prepared ourselves for that eventuality. And BP brought that to light again, and I think this has brought it to light again. What are your thoughts on that?
So, you know, I'll give a couple. One, we have over the years had talked to our clients when we were both doing taxes, and you know, even during the transition, and even you do through payroll, that you know the government takes the approach that businesses don't run themselves, and they expect to see some kind of payroll, and you know the models and the things have changed over the years. Now they've gone to a pretty calculated, you know, reasonable compensation formula. You know, and just I don't want to delve too far off topic here, but you know, there's a model in calculating that. It's now no longer just a percentage, and it does take a little bit of work. But the last thing that you want is the IRS coming in and assigning you a reasonable wage calculation, because you are almost guaranteed to have to hire a tax lawyer and fight it in tax court. And you will win, you'll get a reduction from the tax court, but you'll spend the difference in. And the IRS knows that. They calculate a lot of things on what it's going to cost somebody to fight them. And a lot of the times they will reduce just below that. But with the tax code changes in 2018, you know, business owners in that get a 20% QBI deduction on their income that the business makes, assuming that they meet all the criteria and it's not affected by their adjusted gross income and some other things. But just in the general sense, it's if you got a you know, if you made $100,000, you pay taxes on $80,000. So the IRS knows this, and they are hiring 2,000 agents to only do auditing of S corps, partnerships, those type of things, to make sure people are paying themselves a reasonable compensation. This, just like for business owners, is kind of like service staff during the BP. When you get a whole lot of your money in cash and you don't record it, and it's not reportable somewhere and identifiable, and you can show it somewhere, documentation of it actually happening, it's kind of hard to get any money from any programs that are available. Same thing here. You now have business owners that, for whatever reason, clients of ours, or just in general, you know, the practitioners that I know, they can't get their business owners to take the salary or that is either recommended to them or something along those guidelines. And now you have a crisis like this come along, and your business has stopped or been cut, and because you didn't put yourself on payroll and pay Uncle Sam some self-employment tax, you know, it's kind of like playing the mob the juice. Sometimes you know, you got to make sure the juice is worth the squeeze to get it. And in this case, you know, if you were paying yourself a reasonable wage, you would at least be able to get some money coming in, and in fact, get some money coming in to pay your, even if it's just one person or partners, paying yourself and having it forgiven where, you know, now you can't. And as far as the documentation that going to go, you know, Al and I have both been pushing our clients. Make sure if you get this PPP loan, you have a way to segregate the money or account for every dime of it, so that you can document that 75% of it went to payroll and the other 25% or less went to whatever allowable expenses you have or that you utilize. Because if you don't, I think the burden is going to be on the business owner to show that they use the money for what it is to be forgiven.
And so that brings me to a question that arose earlier today from a mutual customer talking about, what do I do when I get this money? I put it into a separate account. And in this case, it was asking whether or not we should switch over where the payroll was coming out of. And the short answer to that is no, you don't have to go through and kind of redo your inner workings. But as Jim just said, you get that money, I would absolutely advise putting it into a separate account. And if you're using it for payroll, then transfer that money from that segregated account, putting it in. And if you're using us or any of the other services, you can get kind of this total cost for what that payroll run was, and so that you can actually account for every penny, as Jim said, because you are going to have to do that. And I'm going to segue that into the question that's in a Q&A that one of our viewers has seen that this morning, that all government funds for the program for the PPP will be gone by today. And I don't know that that's actually an accurate statement, because we don't
I looked into this, Al, just so as of April 13th, the SBA reported that 248 billion of the PPP funds was allocated. And
so here's my question.
Small Business Administration has approved nearly 1,004,000 loans totaling 248 billion through its Paycheck Protection Plan. So as of 2 days ago, there was
there's an approval process of the loan, doesn't necessarily mean those are going to all convert into grants, right?
Correct, but I think what she is to say is that the 349 billion, I think where I'm reading this question is the 349 billion is going to be gone and there won't be any PPP to apply to. I'm not seeing anything in just a quick Google search that is saying.
But we don't have nobody has the ability yet to actually apply for the grant, aka the forgiveness, right? We haven't seen any of those.
No, I don't believe the applications for that are done. My guess is it was to get the money out, and then they'll figure out the process to put the application together, because I'm sure there's going to be, you know, just as you're dealing with different guidelines for each bank on getting the money, you know, I don't know if there'll be, I would assume you would have to have some kind of uniformity from the government on the forgiveness of it.
Musical chairs. The first people to apply are likely. That'll be interesting to see how that.
Yeah, my understanding on that, how that process will work, is you will apply, and the bank will have up to 60 days to decide on the forgiveness. And I believe it is retroactive to the date of application. So let's say you apply on June 30th and they don't tell you until August 30th. You don't have July and August of interest on the thing. It is allocation on that. You know, it's back to when the application went in. However, that could probably be subject to change, because somebody's not going to want to eat, banks aren't going to want to eat the things. And my guess would be, well, if it takes 60 days, that is probably just for the number of applications that are going to come in. I would assume the faster that the banks approve the application and your documentation or whatever you have to submit to get that grant, the faster they're going to get their money reimbursed or be able to take it off their books or their sheets or whatever they need, however they're categorizing it, so they can go back to doing loans. But I'm not seeing anything that is specifically saying that they're out of money. In my office, I have CNBC on all day long from the time I get here till the time I leave. And if something like that, if they were going to run out, I think there would have been something on it.
Right, because I don't think I don't think we can equate the forgiveness with the number of applications that are going in. Now, the probability of it running out as a result of the number of SBA loans approved for PPP, yeah, it's eventually going to have to run out. It's not an unlimited resource.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's how I interpreted her question, that she had just heard that by the end of today, they would have allocated the 349 billion, and therefore there would be no further, unless the Treasury Department comes out and instructs the banks to continue at the $349 billion mark. How does a bank loan money that additional money has not been allocated to allow you forgiveness? Obviously, the banks aren't going to eat it. And
well, so let's talk about that for just a second, right? If in fact you apply and you receive this PPP loan, it's a loan first and foremost. Let's not forget that part. It is a loan.
Yeah, until you actually get forgiveness and apply for it. We've said that over and over again. Do not assume this is just a grant. You have to apply for the grant status.
You're going to have to be able to cash flow a payment stream later if, in fact, even though you may have spent it entirely on payroll, if the money isn't there to forgive it, it can't be forgiven. So you've got to be prepared 100% that you're the first person that has the door shut in their face because the money's run out.
And that, yeah, I mean, and for those, if you run into something where you don't use 75% and portions of it are forgiven, I mean, I will say this: the terms and the rates are extremely favorable.
Very favorable.
It's 1% on the loan, I believe, and I think you have up to 10 years to pay it back. I guess a lot would depend on some of the smaller businesses that don't have big payrolls or one-person operations, or that, obviously your loan is not going to be as bad. But if, like as we saw today, if you're Ruth Grist and you got $20 million, that's a lot. And for some reason you don't make the mark on that. That is, it's a lot of money to have to pay back. So, but I mean, people need to look at it when that money hits their account. Understand you've got a loan. It is a loan in your hand, and do not, while I would say it's probably more likely than not, you will be able to get grant status and get it forgiven. And my guess would be something along the lines, I don't know if the forgiveness approach would go in the order and allocation of the divvying out money. So if you got your money today on the original 349, you would be in the queue to be guaranteed forgiveness as long as you met all the criteria of that loan, as opposed to first come, first serve basis. And of course, at the end of the day, theoretically, there would be no more loans than money that's been allocated. And I think the banks would probably shut that off pretty quick, or at least a disclaimer: hey, you are applying for a loan that is a loan, and it is outside of the allocation or the scope of the PPP for reasons X, Y, and Z, because they don't. I don't think they necessarily want to be stuck on the hook for loans on potential businesses that may or may not succeed. And depending on how long this goes on, I think you could see a lot of businesses that got this loan that may not be in business, may not survive, especially with some of the impingements on that they put on this of 75% when you can't use it for other stuff and you have no other way to get money. How do you pay your rent? How do you pay your mortgage? How do you do those things? And I think there's going to be a different landscape. You're coming up to it you know, when you're seeing it on the news and earnings today, I think right now there's 19 million people unemployed that are going to go on unemployment. Just to kind of put that in perspective, 25 million people were out of jobs in the Great Depression. Granted, the population was only 122 million, I think, in the country at that time. But I think you could easily see this as a country of 370 million people. If we took 50% of that population as a workable population, and you take 30 or 40 million people and put them on unemployment or out of jobs for any time, you're talking comparable percentages. That is not easy to overcome. And you know, the U.S. economy is like falling off a cruise ship. That doesn't just turn around and come back and pick you up. There's a whole wind up, you know, to it. So just kind of my 2 cents on that one. Say again?
I said, buckle up and be prepared. And this isn't free money. Although if you do get the grant, it's at least income tax free.
Yeah, I one of the things I said to a client today was that, you know, people say, oh, I'm going to get this free money and grant money. Keep in mind, people that have kids today, their kids are probably going to be paying for this. You know, if you got a $1,200 stimulus check because your income was under and you're 90 years old, yeah, there's a good chance statistically it's probably free money to you. You know, if you're a boy or girl that's being born in a hospital today, 20 years from now, you're going to feel what the effects of when you add probably somewhere between $5 to $7 trillion to the national debt in a matter of months. Even if you let's give it a good year, you're growing the national debt by 25%. And this is a perfect storm of disasters to come. You have the coronavirus, you had all this addition to debt, and for the U.S., we're in an election year with absolute polarity in parties and hatred for one another. And you know, I think that one of the differences between this and all the other financial crises we've had, even though there's been from the Great Depression forward, economies are at different phases when it happens. In 2008, there were countries that were ahead of us, there were countries that were behind of us. In this one, everybody's going to go through it at the same time. There isn't going to be the Europeans to bail out the Asian economies, the Asian economies to bail out the U.S. economies. This is we're a short-sighted society, and I don't think this is going to be a you know, there's going to be some short to medium term pain for long-term happiness with this. So
with that said, I'm going to suggest that we all support our local businesses as much as we possibly can during all of this. And because the money you spend locally will stay there and is a whole lot more likely to come back around into your own pocket in your own business. So
agreed. You know, we said this in one of our master networks meetings. You know, I know personally I'm involved in 2 non-for-profit foundations, and just here locally do a lot of knocking on a lot of restaurant doors. And you know, fortunately, some of those are clients, some others are personal friends, and they're always happy to give gift certificates or donating food or donating things, and even some of the local merchants donating stuff. Well, you know, keep that in mind, because a lot of these restaurants that are open, they're not making money. I can tell you that. I know, I was in that business for about 14 years. I know how it works, and there's a lot of these places whose menus are they're just not designed to be carry out places, and the volumes they can make. Some of them are doing it because they have had good financial success, and it's their way of giving back, and it's their way of keeping people working and taking out some of the issues of being quarantined and that. But just something to keep in mind. You know, all of us have gone to other places for something at one time or another, needed a favor, and now those places are gonna, you know, I'm fortunate. There was a post a couple weeks ago on Facebook on for some people this is going to be a sprinkle of a storm. For some people it's going to be a thunderstorm, and for some people it's going to be an F5 tornado or a Category 5 hurricane. I feel fortunate and blessed. For me, obviously things can change, but knock on wood at this point. I'm going to be one of the lucky ones where this is going to be a sprinkle more than it's going to be a storm for me. I'm one of the few who business has only gotten busier because of it. Our running joke for the last few weeks has been the old adage is true. There's only two things certain in life: death and taxes, because we have a global pandemic, and I am still sitting here doing tax returns and what should
I'm
be
sitting here
parole
still
day.
hearing you go, wow about it.
Yeah, which should be parole day is been obviously I've got a bad conduct thing, and I now have to do some additional time in the tax pen. But we understand lots of people are going through hard times, and I'm not saying everybody has to go out, but if you can go out and support a local restaurant or a local business or something. And listen, I'm looking right into the camera telling a lot of people that I know there's a lot of you that got those $1,200 checks. Not saying you got to spend a bunch of it, but, throw a restaurant a bone or two and order something, even if it's just a carry-out appetizer or something that you can help. We've all been there before. And this is the time where I know it myself, I've done it when I've had really hard times going, if I could just get this, I'll always remember it. Well, now I'm remembering it. So, for the others.
And you know what, Jim? I'm going to encourage everybody not just to do that, but tag the restaurant that you went to. Let them
absolutely
help them advertise.
Yeah.
In Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media that you use, if you're using it, just do a check-in and let people know that you got it and you were supporting that local business. That every little bit helps.
Absolutely.
So if there are no other questions,
and again,
I took my glasses off. What time is it? Hey, that'll be about 30 minutes. So
I will say, obviously, if there's anybody that's got any questions, please feel free to reach out to Al and myself. We'll post. We are both of us have blogs on more than you can afford, Mike.
Yeah, Mike, more than you can afford. He's asking how much for the used one. A lot more affordable, Mike. I'll save it.
Hey, Mike, we'll make you a deal on the box that's behind the package. That's that's prison quality. I think each roll is about 7.5 miles long. It's about 42 grit sandpaper. So we'll make you a deal on that one. But the good stuff, no. But again, we're putting stuff on it. Both of us have blogs on our website. We're putting stuff on there about this. Obviously, as we get more information or new information or things come out, we'll continue to do these as long as we can and as long as people find it beneficial. But again, I know we throw a lot of information at you and we don't expect you to digest it all, but feel free to reach out to us. Just understand too that we're one-man shows, and the benefit of being one-man shows is that you get to deal with us directly when you call our respective businesses. The downside of that is when things like this happen, we do get inundated, and we will return your phone calls. We will respond to messages. I know for myself, I think I can speak for Al, you're much more likely to get a hold of me via text or an email than a phone call. To get a quicker response, even if it's just for us to say, hey, we got your message and we'll get back to you. So
all right,
that's all I got.
I've recorded this one today. So the Mike question about your lamp will go maybe viral. I don't know. But we'll post this on YouTube and then put the link out there.
Hey, Mike, just, stay posted because there's a new bigger office coming for me, which might mean I need the full-sized leg lamp. So
I'm gonna have it shipped to him in a wooden box too, and he has to actually get in there and dig it out.
We'll do one of these where you can watch me go in there and throw it, and then since my girlfriend hates the lamp and thinks the movie's the worst movie in the world, I am pretty sure she will be like the wife in that movie, and I will have to buy some glue and tell her how she was always jealous of that lamp. So.
That's so funny. All right. Well, thanks, Jim, for the update and for everybody participating, listening, and the questions. And we'll see you next.
All right, guys. We'll be in touch, and we'll be doing this again soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.
See you.